Well, as we've always said, the task he set himself is quite simply impossible. It's very clear that other heads of government, heads of state across the European Union will not accept the sort of wholesale changes. The only hint he's had of support is that the Germans, I think, might consider some relaxation of employment law or some area like that, but nothing like on the wholesale scale that Cameron would need to be able to come to the British people and say that he'd achieved a change. So we've always said that it couldn't be done. I think this proves that it can't be done. In any case, if it could be done, if you just think of the process of ratification, it would take far longer than 2017. I think what is encouraging, though, is that clearly if you look at the banking situation across Europe and the proposals that are already on the table, there will need to be, Europe will need a new treaty. Now that provides a wonderful opportunity for the UK because we have passed into law a requirement saying that any treaty that gives new powers to the European Union will have to be put to a referendum. So we may get the referendum anyway, but it may well not be the one that David Cameron wanted. Well, in a sense, it ought to be a blackmail, but it's not, because what Cameron has said is that he will bring the results of his renegotiation to the British people in a referendum, and he will campaign to stay in. Now, in a sense, he's sold his negotiating position ahead of time, because the only negotiating position that might have had some traction was to say, give us what we want or we're out. But he isn't saying that. He's saying, give us as much as you'd like to give us and we'll stay in anyway. So why would they give us anything? I mean, the whole way the European Union works, if they make a list of concessions to 1 out of 28 member states, the other 27 member states will come along with their shopping lists, and they'll all have different shopping lists, they'll all want different bits out, and you'll end up with nothing. So I can quite understand from a Brussels point of view that they're not going to give in. And I think Cameron has put himself in an impossible position because how can he possibly come back to the British people with probably a few cosmetic changes, some very minor changes, and pretend that this is a substantial renegotiation. He will be ripped apart by the press, by politicians, by his own backbenchers. I think he'll be in a very difficult position. The only consolation for him is, of course, that his chances of winning the next British general election in 2015 are looking really not very good at all. So in a sense the whole question is hypothetical. He won't be there to do the renegotiation, he won't be there to deliver the referendum. After 2015 we'll have a whole new situation to cope with. Well, it's a very interesting situation because Germany has always really tried to avoid, I think, becoming the leading country in the EU. It's almost embarrassed at the idea of being the dominant country in Europe. And yet, of course, it is the dominant country in Europe, so it can't avoid that situation, although it would like to avoid it. One of the things we're seeing is, of course, that a number of other countries are very reluctant for Britain to leave the EU, because if a large country like Britain leaves the EU, it leaves Germany's position even more dominant than it was before. So I think that is problematic for the whole EU structure. I was very interested by the fact that, was it the German foreign minister, I think, recently made a statement saying that UKIP, my party, actually risked causing a war in Europe by reigniting nationalism. Of course, I think that just shows that he doesn't understand what we're about. We are about democracy and self-determination and independence, but we're also about trade and cooperation. So there's no question of old-fashioned militaristic nationalism. We're not interested in that at all. We're interested in re-establishing Britain as an independent country, a global trading nation. Trade with Europe will continue to be important, but we will govern ourselves. We will not be governed from Brussels.